Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Dominic, and we've got a fairly comprehensive video here for us today. It's covering a lot of information, and I thought some of this would be helpful for projects of your own. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Adobe Substance 3D Sampler and how to create materials that we can bring into like Substance 3D Painter and texture objects, or 3D objects, for use back in Maya and rendered out in Pixar Renderman. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between a couple of different programs, but let me just give you some background context behind the reasoning for this video and this demo. I've got this mound of what I'm planning to have is a mound of laundry or like clothing, but I don't necessarily want to make a bunch of shirts and a bunch of socks and things like that and then either use procedural or sim it to where they all kind of fall onto each other. Instead, I want to save a little bit of geometry and processing power for some of my more important assets and just use a mesh that is painted to look like a pile of clothes, at least to the best of our capabilities, and that's where Adobe 3D Sampler comes in. So the first thing that we need is our 3D object. I started with a primitive just up here, a 2D plane, subdivided it a whole bunch, and then used the soft select tool to just kind of drag up some faces to make this mound, this like pile that I'm going to turn into laundry. So that was fairly straightforward, doesn't take too much time. Now before we move on and before we put this into Substance Painter, it's very important to note that this should be UV unwrapped to the best of our abilities, and we must make sure that it fits all on our UV tile. And then that way we can bring it into Substance Painter and start building our materials on top of it. So we got the geometry out of the way. The next thing that we need is an image of clothing. So you've got a couple of options here. One thing that you can do is you can hand draw or illustrate or paint your own, like, kind of aerial view of a bunch of laundry on the ground. You can also, if you have a bunch of laundry or clothing, you can also just kind of make a pile on the ground, snap a photo of that and use that as well. What I've decided to do is just kind of make an AI image because I think that's, it's very quick and dirty for this demo. But I just used Microsoft's image creator because it's free, and I just typed in a prompt saying I want a tileable texture color map of a pile of laundry and clothing and things like that, and so it spit me out a couple of options. I picked my favorite one and downloaded it onto my computer. And that is what we're going to use to make our smart material in Adobe Substance 3D Sampler. So let's go ahead and open up Sampler right now. When you do, this is a brand new program, and this is a very, very powerful program, and I should disclaim that this video is not going to go very far in depth of all of the things that you can do in Sampler, but we're just going to use it for this particular application just to, very slowly introduce you guys into it a little bit more. I should have more videos on Sampler and some other tools that are in it at a later moment because it's a very, very cool program. So when you open up a new Substance 3D Sampler, you've got to make a new project, and so we can click on that blue icon right here. And the preset, the most recent or most popular preset that we can use is this one right here, Convert Image to Material, and that's the one we're going to be using today. So if I click on that preset, it says that I need to drag and drop or browse an image on my device to grab it from. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to my source images folder that I've got for this project, and let's see if I can find my sock AI image, which is right here, and I'm just going to drag and drop, and it's going to identify that image and just kind of show it right here. I can always remove it or replace it if I accidentally grab the wrong image. I'm going to change the category from ground to fabric because I want this to feel a little bit more like fabric, and it's going to be matte, so it's not going to be glossy because most textiles are not. And with all that said and done, I'll hit create. So it's going to take a little bit of time to process that image, and as you can see, once it's done, it will show you that tiled image on this just rudimentary 3D sphere. So that's pretty cool, but there's a couple of things that I don't like about it right now that we've got to address and fix up before this guy is ready to go. The main thing is I do not like seeing these kind of borders between each and every photo that's being used in this tile, in each tile. So I want it to seem a little bit more seamless as we move from image to image, and I want to get rid of some of these noticeable creases right here, or some of these noticeable borders and margins. So in order to do that, we're going to start layering up in our layers, right, a layer library right here with some filters that are going to kind of help give us this look. So we're going to talk about filters. We're going to also talk about different attributes that you can play around with this to give us that material that we want. I should also note you've got a couple of icons right here in the top right of the viewport UI as well. You can kind of modify these depending on kind of the texture that you want, and also just to see a little bit more information. So for example, if I go to material right here, I can change the tiling. For example, if I want to see my socks bigger, I can reduce the number of tiles that it takes, and now it just takes 2 instead of 3. But I'm going to leave that as 3 right there. You can do a couple of other things. You can rotate the UV tiles and kind of translate them around, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. Displacement. Displacement is something that I like to see right here, and it gives me a little bit more of a realistic view. And what Substance 3D Sampler does is it identifies kind of objects and shadows and highlights from that image that we had just imported to give us a simulated displacement that we can use in our materials as well. So the way to control that is right here on height. There's very, 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 very little or a very low value right now, but as you can see, as I scale that up, things kind of start to feel a little bit more wavy, a little bit more kind of rough and rocky, and so that's pretty interesting. There's another attribute right here, displacement quality, and this is how much we are going to subdivide that geometry to get this displacement. So then you'll start to notice these kind of ridges and canyons and peaks will start to be smoothed out by increasing our displacement quality. However, I don't want to overload it and get it to a very, very high value, because then it's going to take quite a bit of processing power, but I'm going to leave it alone right there. So while I'm doing this, I'm just going to kind of mess with the displacement to give me kind of the height texture that I want to, that's not kind of too rigid and too spiky, but maybe just enough to kind of break up the uniformity of the sphere. So I feel like this is feeling pretty good. So that's already very, very cool. I like this for now, but I still need to address these margins or these borders on those UV tiles. So the way we do that is we need to add an additional filter to affect this sock AI image. So I'm going to come down here to my asset library down in the bottom left, and I'm going to look for a library called filters right here. And as you can see, there's a bunch of different filters that I can add onto my layers that we've got over the top right. But perhaps the most important one that we've got to find, if we just kind of scroll down, is a make tileable filter. So let's go ahead and see if that's in here. It looks like this, make it tile, and it's got a bunch of hexagons tiled around. I'm just going to drag and drop this above my sock AI image. And now, as you can see, it already goes to work, and it's looking quite a bit better. Now, there's still a little bit of, some funkiness going on right there. So if I do want to modify this make a tile layer, I can go to these attributes right here and start playing around with things like the threshold. And I can kind of reduce this down to see if that will give me a better kind of view. I can play around with the smoothness, and this kind of helps just warp it up a little bit as well. And I'm just going to kind of do this to help mitigate or minimize just how visible our tiling can be. Right? So maybe like this. There we go. We can also dial through some random seeds, but I'm not really going to mess with that right now. So at least from far away, it's not too noticeable. It's much less noticeable than it was before. But of course, you can always play around with these thresholds and just kind of get the look that you want. So I'm going to leave it just about right there. All right. So now, I mean, we've got a little bit of like phasing through and through, but it's not too noticeable. We've got a lot going on this sphere, so I think we might be able to get away with it. There are a couple of other filters that we can add on these as well. Each one of these does something kind of cool. But something that I'm going to mess around with is the HSV, or the hue saturation value, the color attributes of my image, because right now it's looking a little bit dull, so I want to kind of just pop up the contrast and just kind of manage some stuff going on in here. I should note these are organized alphabetically, so if I go down to H, I'll be able to find hue/saturation. And if I drag and drop that above my SOC AI image, it's going to load, and it may take a little bit of time for it to just kind of process, but this allows me to come back here and, let's say, boost the saturation of the colors on my image, and it's going to process that, and now we can see it's a little bit more vibrant. I can also reduce the lightness, the overall lighter values of this. So now if I reduce it just a hair, we will start to notice this gets a little bit more dark. So that's kind of fun to mess around with there as well. Let's see. We've got a couple more. I'm not going to mess around too much more with these for right now, but I'll have another video about making your own smart materials from scratch in here, and we're definitely going to be diving a little bit deeper into what these guys can do. So it's a very, very cool process, setting up and layering on filters to get us the look that we want. So I think this is feeling pretty decent. I'm going to kind of leave this alone, just about right there. And this is starting to feel like a very fun pile of socks, which is exactly what I want. It's kind of bumpy, so I get a little bit of displacement and height variation that I'm really enjoying. And we've got a lot of colors, and it didn't take me a lot of work to set up in general. So as we're working on this, we'll notice in the top left a material sphere that's just over here. This one's called Untitled, and that's because I haven't saved or named this material yet. So I can right-click this and type in rename. I'm going to type on here sock-texture. And then if this is ready to go into a program like Substance 3D Painter, if we're done modifying it, which for this demo we are, we can go to File, Send to Substance 3D Painter. Click. And now you won't see anything else. We don't have to set up any more parameters. What it's going to do is send us a material file, which is SBRAR, already into your synced up Substance Painter, which I've got loaded up right here. So if we navigate to Adobe Substance 3D Painter, I've gone ahead and added in the mesh already. I've gone ahead and baked it, so it's ready to start painting. If I go to my asset library, I should be able to kind of scroll through and find a sock texture. This is sock-texture that we have gone ahead and added in from Substance Sampler. And all I need to do is just drag and drop this onto my object. Now, there are a couple of things that I can mess around with, such as the tiling. If I dial this down or dial this up, maybe to about right there, now we're starting to get a little bit more variation. And now it's starting to feel like it is layered on with a bunch of socks. Now, if you're running to this issue, and sometimes my Substance Painter will default to this, where you do not see the displacement, you can always navigate to your shader settings right over here, and we can go over here to this tab called Displacement and Tessellation, and we can turn on our subdivision count and scale up our displacement. So that way we will be able to see the bumpiness of our textures right here. There we go. So that's already looking very, very, very cool. And now that we're back in Substance Painter, we can do everything that we potentially want Substance Painter to do. I might come back through here and, let's say, create a mask and create a generator. And if I use a generator like, let's use light. Let's kind of dial this down, light attention right there. Set this to multiply. Change this to just a nice dark violet color. Now we're just kind of baking in some shadows. I can do the same thing over here, make another layer, add a black mask. Let's add a generator. This one we're going to attach a position. We're going to dial this down a little bit. Maybe not position. Maybe ambient occlusion would be a fun one. Let's kind of tone that down. So we have something a bit like this. Another multiply layer just to kind of carve in some darker darks, and now that's feeling really, really fun. So that is what my mesh will start to look like now. And once you've done all of this, we can go ahead and just export our textures the good old-fashioned way. I'm going to set this to Pixar Renderman, Renderman Pixar Surface, so that way I get my 5 exports over here. And I'm going to select my output directory to a nice space where I can grab it from. So let's go to my textures. Let's make a folder called Sockpile. And I'm going to export just like that right out. And now I'm going to breeze through this process because I've got a couple other videos that talk about, setting up a Pixar surface in the Hypershade. But we'll just kind of stick with the gist of it. I'm going to type in a Pixar surface, and this one is going to be called Sockpile. There we go. Then I'm going to make a couple of Pixar textures. I'm just going to make a few of them, just a couple that I need, such as my diffuse, such as my roughness, and such as my displacement. Down here, I'm going to make a Pixar displace node, which is going to be reduced gain, maybe to 0.2. We can always modify that later. That needs to connect into a Pixar displacement transform node just down here, which is set to centered remapping. So after displacement scalar, scalar to RGB alpha. This is diffuse, so we'll linearize this and we'll connect RGB to diffuse color, and then roughness will connect to result R to specular roughness. There we go. I don't need to worry about the specular face color because obviously it's not metallic. Oh, and I need one more. This is our Pixar normal map. So we'll just go ahead, attach this bump normal right there. Those images that had spit out from, there we go. Let's see, VDev rig. Let's go back up to textures, Sockpile. We just spit these out. So there's my diffuse map. This is going to be my roughness map, which is right here. Our normal map is right here. And finally, our displacement map is right here. So if I click on this guy, we'll be able to see its effect right here in the preview window. And we can always modify this to kind of better fit the look that we're going for. So it's looking pretty good already. And then we'll, of course, just come back over here, assign our Sockpile to material, save, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a dome light so that way we can see this guy in here for now. Let's grab a panorama, and let's go ahead and render it and see if our hard work has paid off. So once this guy has loaded in, we can tweak some stuff just to make sure that everything is looking the way that we want it to. And the result that we get looks very much like this. And if I zoom in a little bit, let's go ahead and just kind of be right here. Then we will be able to see our pile of socks textured in, rendered. We didn't have to make any additional, meshes, and we didn't have to sim anything up. But this guy is looking fairly well for being just a very simple mesh geometry. So we can of course play around with this further. We can set up different tiling techniques if we want it to be a little less uniform. We can also bump up or reduce the amounts of geometry that we've got at play here as well. But there's a lot of experimentation that can go into this that can get you that look that you want. But something that I think is important to note is just how cool and how important and how effective a program like Adobe Substance Sampler can be with creating your own smart materials. So I highly encourage you guys to test it out. See what you guys can make. See what you guys can make with your own images or with your own drawings, and what you can create very easily as a smart material to use in all of your other projects. So without further ado, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. You can send it in the comments or just reach out to me. But I wish you guys the best of luck in your projects. Hopefully there's something helpful in here that you found. But without further ado, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.